This is the story of a prisoner named Richard, who has been in jail for the past 6 years. He was imprisoned for the alleged murder of his wife and child. Ever since his wife and child passed away, Richard lost his vocal god, meaning he lost his voice. And since then, for the entire 6 years, Richard hasn't spoken a single word to anyone. However, his behavior in prison was very good with everyone. He followed all the rules, did all the work, and everyone, the prisoners and the officers, were very pleased with him. So it was decided that Richard would be sent out on a work parole. If you don't know what work parole is, let me explain. It is granted to prisoners with good behavior, allowing them to go outside and work so they can return to jail after finishing their job. Richard was also granted a 6-day work parole. The jailer tells Richard that an agent will come to pick him up and that he doesn't need to do much. There's a house deep in the forest. All he has to do is work there as a watchman for 6 days, meaning he just needs to stay inside the house. That's all the jailer knows, and Richard doesn't need to do anything more than that. He will also be paid very well. When he's released from jail, he can use that money to start a new life. Richard agrees to take the job, but no one knew that this wasn't a job. It was a horrifying death. Why am I saying that? You'll understand soon, so keep watching till the end of the video. Finally, Richard gets out of prison and meets the agent. She tells him exactly what the jailer said, that he has to stay in a house in the middle of the forest. The agent tells Richard that her company deals with Heiza. This is the first time Richard hears that word, and maybe it's your first time too. So what is Heiza? The agent explains that in Chinese, Heiza, or Hangzek, refers to a belief. If someone dies in a house, it's believed that their spirit still lingers there, and people end up calling that house cursed. Or let's just say, they turn it into a haunted house. That's when the Hank ritual is performed there. In this ritual, one person stays in the house for 6 days, lighting one candle each day. It is believed that if the person completes all 6 days in the house, then when they leave, the spirit also leaves with them, freeing the house. So the agent's company used to cleanse such haunted houses of spirits so that no rumors would spread in the market, and the agent could sell the house at a good price. She finally arrives at the house with Richard. There's also a carpenter named Mike there who works around the house. Mike and the agent talk to each other about how the house has a water leak, while Richard looks around the nearby property. He notices that there's also an outhouse nearby, but there doesn't seem to be anything special there, just an empty, deserted shed. Then he sees a forest in front of him. Right in the middle of that forest stands a strange tree. He walks up to the tree and finds a doll lying there. He finds it very odd. Why is there a doll next to the tree? He reaches out to pick up the doll, and that's when the first twist in the story happens. A hand grabs Richard's hand. Richard gets scared. He has no idea what's going on. Just then, the agent shows up looking for him. Richard feels it might have just been his imagination. Then the agent says, "Let me tell you about this house first." She explains that many years ago, an old couple, an elderly man and woman, died in the house. Since then, people have started saying that the house is haunted. But you don't even believe in ghosts, right? So you're the perfect person for this house. You don't have to do anything. Just stay in this house for 6 days. I'll lock you from the outside, and you'll stay inside the house. You'll have all the food and drinks you need. You'll have clothes too. You just have to relax for 6 days. And yes, I'll take your phone away, because for 6 days, you're not allowed to contact anyone. All you have to do is spend 6 peaceful days in this house and light one candle every night. Once 6 nights have passed, I'll come back on the 7th day to let you out. And after that, you'll get your money. And you can go to jail. Richard agrees. He didn't believe in ghosts anyway. But poor Richard didn't know what was going to happen to him in the coming days. And you don't know either, do you? Just wait a bit. Everything will be revealed slowly. Tonight is the first night. Richard lights a candle and starts looking around the entire house. The whole house is open, except for one door. That one door is locked. What could be behind that door? Richard tries to find the key to that door, but he doesn't succeed. Looking at that door, memories of his life come rushing back. How happy he used to be with his wife Emma. Richard and Emma loved each other deeply, but Richard had one problem. He was heavily addicted to drugs. Emma also had objections about this and questioned why Richard used substances so much. But Richard was never ready to quit his addiction. Things only began to change when Emma and Richard found out that Emma was pregnant. That's when Richard decided he would support Emma. But whether Richard actually stood by her or not, that we'll find out later in the story. The story now brings us back to the present. The first night had already passed, and nothing had happened. Now it's the second day. The day passes by, and now it's night again. Richard was still obsessed with what was behind that door. He opens the door slightly and puts his hand inside to turn on the light. But poor Richard doesn't notice that there is another hand inside, slowly reaching toward his. Before that mysterious hand could touch his, Richard pulls his hand back. Now you get it, right? Richard is not alone in this house. Someone else is there with him. Who is it? Let's find out. Be patient. Now it's the third day. Richard becomes determined to find out what's behind that door. Somehow he manages to open it, but he doesn't realize that he's just made the biggest mistake of his life. He steps inside and suddenly he senses a shadow approaching him. Terrified, he slams the door shut and runs back to his room. But then he notices the shadow is now in his room too. He's completely shaken. Now he truly believes that there's some spirit or ghost in the house. But the poor guy can't even speak about it. And leaving the house? That's not even an option. Somehow he makes it through the night. Now it's the fourth day, and today Mike comes to visit Richard. Richard feels good seeing Mike. Mike has also come to visit Richard to check if he's okay. Richard and Mike communicate through gestures and gradually become good friends. They both shared the same sorrow. Richard had lost his wife and children, and Mike's daughter had also left him a year ago. Slowly, Mike and Richard become close friends. Now Richard asks Mike about the history of the house. Do you know anything about this house? And then Mike tells Richard, you don't know? The agent didn't tell you what happened in this house? Let me tell you. In the 1800s, a woman named Morgan used to live in this house. Back then, there was a large village here, but a disease started spreading through the village, and gradually people began to die. The villagers suspected that Morgan was practicing black magic, so they began torturing her. They sewed Morgan's mouth shut so she wouldn't be able to perform black magic. Then Richard remembers the shadow he saw had its mouth sewn shut. But even after doing all this, the disease in the village didn't go away. So the villagers assumed Morgan was using her eyes to cast spells. So they sewed her eyes shut too. But even after that, the disease still didn't stop. And then the villagers decided to kill Morgan's daughter as well. They did exactly that. Morgan kept suffering, but no one listened to her. The villagers had done everything, but Morgan still wasn't dead. Then the villagers decided that they would hang her, and they did exactly that. But what's this? Morgan still didn't die. 1 day passed, then 2, 3, even 6 days went by, and Morgan was still alive. So the villagers buried her alive, and next to Morgan's body, they placed her daughter's doll. Remember? That doll which Richard had found at the beginning. It is said that Morgan didn't die even then, and that she is still alive to this day. All she has is her daughter's doll. And it's said that whoever ends up with that doll, Morgan finds them, no matter where they are, and kills them painfully. Now Richard finally understands the truth about this house. Mike tells him that he's not the first person to stay there. 6 people have lived in that house before him, and not a single one of them ever came back. Something always happens and they just vanish. But you, Mike says, are the first one who has stayed here for 4 days. Others leave within a day or 2. But all this is just a story. Don't believe it. Mike says this and walks away. But Richard is starting to believe it now. Night falls slowly. Richard begins to miss his wife, Emma. He remembers how angry Emma used to get when she was pregnant. She used to beg him to stop drinking, and they fought a lot during that time. Richard is lost in memories of Emma, and suddenly in that memory he sees a shadow, Morgan. He gets very scared. He doesn't know what to do. He goes to take a shower, but just then, a shadow picks up his clothes and walks away with them. Richard steps out looking for his clothes and sees the shadow carrying them upstairs. He follows it, and finally, he comes face to face with Morgan. Morgan knocks Richard unconscious and he starts remembering everything. His wife, his child, everything. In the morning when Richard wakes up, he sees a dark mark on his neck. He can't understand what's happening. What does Morgan even want from him? Today again, Mike comes to meet him and explains that 5 days have passed. This is the 5th day. Just 2 more days, and after that, you'll be out of here. Richard feels happy, thinking he'll finally be free. But the poor guy doesn't know what's going to happen today. Richard is heating food in the microwave, and he starts remembering his wife. How after giving birth, she was becoming more and more depressed. She was losing her mental stability, and one day, she ended up killing their child. When Richard found out, he rushed back. Though he had already lost his child, he still wanted to save his wife. He said just one thing to her: "I will never leave you alone." But his wife had already realized that things would never be okay again. She laid down in front of a car and died too. When the police arrived shortly after, they assumed that Richard had killed both his wife and child. Richard didn't say anything in his defense, and for the past 6 years, he has been serving punishment for a crime he never committed. Even today, he remembers his wife. Then he sees something written on the boat: "I will never leave you alone." Who wrote that? He realizes it was Morgan. Now he knows he must escape this house. He looks upstairs. Morgan is there. As he goes up, Morgan attacks him. Now Richard can't stay in that house for even a second. He breaks the lock and runs away. But where will he go? In this jungle, around this house, the entire area is ruled by Morgan. Avoiding Morgan, he runs into the outhouse. Morgan tries to attack him, and she does. But what does Morgan really want from him? Hold on. The climax is yet to come. The next morning, Mike comes looking for Richard again. He shouts out loud for him, but there's no response from Richard. Then Mike searches the house, and just then, a phone starts ringing upstairs. Mike picks up the phone and hears his daughter's voice saying, "Papa, now you will die too." Mike is completely confused, not understanding what's going on. He runs outside and sees someone inside the outhouse. Thinking Richard might be there, he heads in. That was the last mistake of his life, because now Morgan had turned Richard into a demon just like her. Mike sees Richard, but before he can do anything, Richard kills him too. Days go by. Everyone seems to have forgotten about Richard, and now a real estate agent brings a couple to show them the house. The agent and the couple enter the house, but they see Richard already inside. And before the three of them can escape, Richard kills them too. Morgan needed a servant, and finally she got one. So what do you think? Can the curse of this haunted house ever be broken? I think this story deserves a part 2. Let me know in the comments section. Also subscribe to this channel for more horror stories like this.